there are a couple of things that are being yacked about in social media and stuff. And one was about the New York Times. And you got to remember, when it's the mainstream media, they always have an agenda. And they've always had an agenda against single women. Always. This has always been. And again, we have an article that at least one commenter on a YouTube channel noted it's basically the author has a confirmation bias. So she has this idea that women are just delaying childbirth, and many of them are. And it is true in that article that more women past 40, I think it is, have kids, or more likely have kids than teenagers. That's all true. But what is going on with the youngest cohort isn't necessarily what is going on with millennials, and I don't know if Gen X is even on the tail end of that, because they're pushing 50 or over 50 now. But this trend isn't so much about delay. Yeah, there is delay to an extent that women are doing it, but more and more women are rejecting having kids and rejecting marriage. That is what the Heritage Foundation is absolutely having a stroke over, a collective stroke over, because they think it should go back to marrying young. And it isn't younger, it's young. It's 18 to 25, basically. When women's brains are not fully developed, well, men's either. And they did this during a time when there were strong unions and there was a lot less income inequality between the masses and the very rich. We don't have that now. The rich are stealing us blind, and I could go on and on and on about Trump and his fellow degenerates, and they are a bunch of degenerates. It should be noted from Epstein that the more money you got, the more screwed up you get, in general. But back in the 50s, in the late 40s, post-war era, 1945 to about 1975, it was a whole different story. And there was a huge stigma attached against unwed births, and hundreds of thousands of young women, teenagers primarily, were forced to give up their babies for adoption. They were kicked out of school. They went into these homes for unwed mothers and were shamed. And then when they had their babies, they were taken away from them to give to some other family. And then, of course, decades later, these babies go out and try to find their birth parents, and there you are. Why did you give us up? That kind of stuff. But it changed, and I've talked about this, I think in the previous video or the video before that, that by the early 70s, this had totally changed, because women were keeping their babies, including young white women, and that's what precipitated the drastic decline in the adoptions. And now, of course, young women are focusing on what they want to do with their lives. They're not focusing on dating and pairing up in teenage, like they did back when I was in high school and even before that. It was so damn pathetic. And these girls would pick the first stinking guy that asked them out, and they'd marry him. And of course, most of the time, the great majority of the time, those marriages were failures, because they didn't have the judgment-making ability to be able to tolerate living with another person, let alone have kids. Well, of course, it's a good thing to delay it for those childbearing and all of that, for those who want it. But more and more women are deciding not to do it at all. And this article wanted to focus on only those who aspire someday to have kids, but oh, they couldn't afford it. Oh, they haven't found the right guy. Blah, 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 blah. And not really what's going on with a lot of women. And another 10, 20 years, if I'm still kicking around by then, and I'll look at these articles, and the New York Times will probably still be around, and they'll still be hand-wringing about why the birth rates are even plummeting more. There's not one damn thing they can do about it to reverse it. It's done. But anyway, the New York Times is under a damn fucking paywall. So that's why I got this little talk about here from Instagram. So that's what that is. I mean, I can provide the link if you have the means to go and read it. And of course, they had old Roger Severino, the culprit, the chief culprit of writing about how he's going to preserve the American family from extinction in his little screed for the Heritage Foundation Project 2026. And oh, well, it's a good thing, but then he wanted women to marry, okay, it's women mainly, but women and men to marry young. That's what they want, because they figure they'll have more likely to have kids, but they don't have the money. So there you are, if they're inclined. But more and more women are just throwing in the towel, like I did very early in life, and just said, fuck it all. I wasn't put on this earth to be a servant. And there was one part in there that talked about selfishness. You're selfish if you don't do this. This is the biggest slur that is given to women who don't fit in with their damn patriarchal bullshit. And the reason that women are called selfish is because they see themselves as human beings. They're not a thing to be fucked and have kids and serve men. And who the hell wants to do that? Spend their damn life wasted doing that shit. Nobody wants to do that. Not if they're a thinking human being that isn't brainwashed with patriarchy and right-wing religion. But anyway, that's the end of that. And it kind of, well, it isn't really about the birth rates, but there was a lot of yakking on social media last week about this so-called Alpine divorce, that these guys and these women go out on a hike somewhere usually that the women aren't familiar with, and the dudes just leave them there to die. Basically, it's attempted murder. Certainly negligence, at the very least. And because, for whatever reason, they're being an asshole. And that was a big meme. But, some commenters have said Alpine divorce just kind of trivializes what is really a serious problem, is that these men want you dead. Die of exposure. Die of starvation. Die of being mauled and eaten up by a mountain lion or a grizzly bear. Or a black bear, depending on what part of the country you're at. Or whatever. And they would take off, the guys would take off and leave the women up there in the wild, and they take off and drive home, or they wait at the car for a little bit before they take off. And I always thought, well, there's always this incessant propaganda about women should never do anything alone. Oh my God, you shouldn't do anything alone. You're asking to get all this stuff happening to you. So now these protectors, these partners that they couple up with, and they go out somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, and they're dumped. Yeah, that's real protection. But no woman should ever put up with a guy that does that. But this shit has happened forever. And I always think when I see something like this, it wasn't an Alpine divorce, it was dubbed the Grand Canyon divorce of the infamous Robert Spangler. Let's look him up. I probably have talked about him. I know I have. And whether he was actually a serial killer, he's noted as a serial killer. But because that he killed his family in 1978, killed his wife and killed his son and daughter because he didn't want him anymore. He met another woman who I think that was his second wife. And then, and he got away with it initially. And he took up with his second wife, and she was a big hiker in the Grand Canyon, so he got into it. And she even wrote a book about hiking in the Grand Canyon, which was a well-regarded book. And what was her name? No, they didn't say. Sharon Cooper. And yeah, he was already having, Spangler, at the time that he killed his wife and kids, he admitted that he and his wife had marital problems, that he planned to leave her, and he was having an affair with a co-worker, Sharon Cooper. He said he left the house early in the morning and returned after the bodies had been discovered. So supposedly, the wife had killed the kids and then killed herself, and he staged it. Oh, he was a piece of shit. Just because he didn't want to bother with her anymore. Just because he might have to have paid child support and all this shit. Whatever damn reason. So he takes up with Sharon Cooper, and they were together for quite a while. Yeah, they had the case, and this was in Colorado. And they had said it was a murder-suicide. So he got away with it, and then he married Sharon Cooper and moved into the house. He had a lot of nerve, where the family was killed. And then he and Sharon shared a common interest in hiking. So she wrote a book about it, as I mentioned. And then, of course, they had marital problems, eventually, of course. And then they split in 1988. And here she had told people after Robert's father died, she began to believe Robert was out to get her. So that's been rumored that he had something to do with his father's death, too. But, anyways, they divorced. And then, eventually, they lived together some years later, but she killed herself. And he strenuously denied he ever killed Sharon Cooper. But that's a little after the other thing. And it was the third marriage. And the third marriage was one to a woman named Donna Sundling. And she had grown kids and grandkids. And she was an aerobics instructor, but she was not an avid hiker like Sharon Cooper, and she was afraid of height. And Spangler was big on going to the Grand Canyon. Even despite her protestations because of the height thing, she and Robert Spangler went and backpacked in the Grand Canyon in an attempt to save their marriage. And then, cue the violins, on April 11th, 1993, Spangler appeared at a ranger station in the Grand Canyon and calmly told the ranger that his wife had fallen to her death. He explained they had stopped to take a picture on the trail, and when he looked back, his wife was gone. Rangers located Sundling's body approximately 160 feet below the trail. The autopsy report concluded she had sustained massive injuries, including abrasions, contusions, lacerations, and multiple fractures of the neck, chest, and lower extremities. Spangler was never directly implicated in this wife's death because it was ruled an accident. He drew national attention with interviews on several television shows. As a grieving husband, Spangler discussed his wife's accidental death and the dangers of hiking in the Grand Canyon. Spangler continued to backpack the canyon with a variety of partners several times a year. But eventually, yeah, he did reconnect with the second wife. She moved in, and then she died of an overdose. But in 1999, investigators from various agencies, including the Department of Interior, NPS, and police departments, linked the cold case homicides in their respective jurisdictions. And of course, Arapahoe County was where Spangler's first wife and kids were murdered. So anyway, they were doing that, and then they suggested that investigators complete a subject history on Spangler, stressing that investigators should familiarize themselves with all available information. Early investigation revealed that Spangler was an educated, intelligent, and successful man. A charismatic individual, he worked in careers in human relations and public speaking. And he spent a lot of time in different parts of Colorado and hiking the Grand Canyon. And then they found out that he had terminal cancer. And an investigative immediately found Spangler, and complete confession was critical for prosecution because of the lack of existing evidence. And so he admitted it. He admitted he killed his wife and his 2 kids and his 3rd wife. But he denied killing his 2nd wife. Investigators confronted Spangler with the 1978 murders of his wife and children, the drug overdose of his 2nd wife, and the murder of his 3rd wife in the Grand Canyon. At the end of the interview, Spangler told investigators, "Well, you're naming one too many, remember?" So that the 2nd wife he denied. And then this is what he said. He told investigators how, while married to his first wife, he fell in love with Sharon Cooper, then shot his wife and 2 teenage children to be with her. Further, Spangler said he smothered his son with a pillow after shooting him because the bullet wound was not lethal. He strongly denied involvement in the overdose death of his 2nd wife and refused to discuss the death in the Grand Canyon because he feared a civil lawsuit from his 3rd wife's grown children. Investigators encouraged Spangler to talk about the Grand Canyon murder by telling him that killing several people at one time did not make him a serial killer. This approach worked on Spangler. After a period of silence, he said, "You've got your serial." Spangler then described how he masterminded the Grand Canyon murder and pushed his wife over the edge while she was facing him. And that was dubbed the Grand Canyon divorce. So anyway, abandoning or killing a partner is not unheard of. And not unheard of. Robert Spangler was in some ways a pioneer in assholery. And an outlier, actually, because he did murder 4 people, at least. But anyway, I thought I'd talk a little bit about that and about Robert Spangler, and that's probably going to be about it for me today.